Look, I've been playing a little bit of that Diablo Immortal game, and my God, the microtransactions in that sucker. But
it's egregious. Yeah,
it is. But it's still so much fun. It's still Diablo. I'm addicted.
History is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Hey guys, you can call me Keebler. Listening to your July 25th Strange News and the segment about Ring cameras being shared with God knows who reminded me of a story I read this weekend on Nextdoor. Itself worthy of an episode. Nextdoor, the hive of the nosy neighbor and the overreactive. Accurate. There is a June 2021 story on Vox about this, a different bit of smart technology, Nest, and their smart thermostats. The story is that power companies in Texas have been using an app connected to the Nest thermostat to increase their customers' air conditioner settings a few degrees here and there as a way to let them cut power consumption and preserve their too fragile power grid. The culprit is a program called Smart Savers Texas, which enters folks in a $5,000 sweepstakes if they surrender some measure of control to their smart thermostat. People were hot about it on Nextdoor, as people tend to be on Nextdoor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, and also hot. One complained they had a newborn baby who could not speak up about being too hot. Another worried about the implications of northern climates in the cold winter. So, some grist for the conspiracy grinder. Thanks all, and I love your show. Thank you, Keebler, for this hot tip. I found the Vox article in question from June 21st of last year by Sarah Morrison, How Your Power Company Can Remotely Control Your Smart Thermostat. And as I've mentioned recently, I purchased a house, and the previous owners were a bit of a smart home techie nerds, which I am too. I like all that stuff. I have all the Hue bulbs and all of that. I'd never owned a Nest system in my previous rentals because they were rentals, but this place came pre-installed with one, and it's really cool. It's you can set it for a schedule to have the air fluctuate depending on the time of day, depending on if you're home or not. There's all kinds of ways of doing it, and yes, I understand the implications of all of this connectedness and cloud capabilities and the risk it may pose to privacy, but I've given all of that up long ago, and I'm happy to live in a futuristic home, for the privilege of giving away some semblance of privacy. And I'm not that worried about this whole snitching thing. I do think it's interesting, and there are implications. I also have a Ring situation my girlfriend brought over from her previous place, and my kid, who's old enough now to stay home by herself, is a fan because she can look at the cameras. We can monitor the cameras, remotely when we're away. Anytime someone's at the front door, you get a notification, and you can even talk to the person at the front door when you're not there. So there's some cool things about that. The Nest power company issue is a very interesting one, and presumably it does require some sort of buy-in. But it's, again, maybe one of those fine print kind of situations. The Smart Savers Texas program, it accurately does involve a sweepstakes where you can win $5,000 off of your energy bill for the coming year. But a lot of these users didn't realize exactly how much control they were giving to the power companies. And so from the Vox article, quote, the idea of a power company turning up your thermostat like a stereotypical electricity bill conscious dad might seem dystopian, but it's also fairly common. There are programs like Smart Savers Texas all over the country, from California to New England. The idea behind them is to decrease power consumption to alleviate stress on the electrical grid and avoid brownouts. Since customers aren't likely to volunteer to use less of the power they pay for when they need it most, these programs give them an incentive and the means to do so easily by proxy. I'm just going to keep going because this is good stuff. Some programs provide better incentives than others. When it launched in 2011, Philadelphia's Smart AC Saver program gave participants a $120 bill credit, which was apparently too generous and was cut to just $40 in subsequent years. But Smart Savers Texas only offers this chance for the sweepstakes, to win this big prize. And apparently the terms were super vague. So, it's very interesting terms of service kind of question here when you're entering into this. And also just the fact that it is so easy to just click the box and say, yes, I accept, without actually reading the fine print. And it's one thing if it's like a website or something like that, but it's another thing when these things actually infiltrate your home. And it really should give you pause and make you a lot more conscious about reading these types of terms of service. And also, I believe Nest is owned by Google. You have to use the Google Home app to control the Nest, which is a little weird because there's a Nest app, but it makes you use Google Home. So I'm a little confused as to why they both exist. It might just be a legacy thing. So you are kind of probably being monitored, whether it's just, for informational purposes, for statistics, power consumption and all that. But there are kind of far-reaching implications for what these kinds of programs could portend for the future. Where within those terms of services, you could be giving away much more control over these smart devices than you realize without even entering into a sweepstakes of some kind. I don't know. What do y'all think? Is this the tip of the iceberg? Is this the beginning of that slippery slope into, having your thermostat controlled by, some overlord? Or is this just, a clever way of trying to reduce, strain on the grid, which is technically good for everyone in the long run?
Full slip and slide. It's happening. I mean, this is another indication of the overall trend toward removing the concept of ownership, right? The concept of privacy is already an endangered species. And as we pointed out in the past, the modern understanding of privacy is itself a pretty recent development. So it makes sense that people would want to remove the idea of privacy, but also removing the idea of ownership allows you to sell something, but never really give it to the person. You can give them a service, right? And now you can have increasing control over how that service is delivered. So I think next things to happen, we'll see this increasingly in autonomous vehicles. There's already in some non-autonomous vehicles, there are complaints about having to pay extra to unlock features that already exist in some cars. I believe BMW is a great example of that, Tesla as well. We're going to see this increasingly, I think, in consumer electronics. We're already, it's very common now for someone to not actually buy a phone because they're pretty expensive for most folks, but instead to get kind of a layaway plan. And then that layaway plan can also be an excellent entry point into forcing people to have stuff. Because just like we said with Sesame Credit, remember, it was opt-in the beginning. And this smart thermostat thing is opt-in at the beginning. That's where I think it's headed. I want to shout out my pal Rebel Devil on Instagram, who actually knows one of those 11 people involved in one of those 11 cases where Amazon was snitching. But yeah, no, I think I don't even think it's the beginning. I think it's a future that is closer and closer to becoming the present. So I don't blame anyone who says they want to go full analog. Just be aware it's going to be increasingly difficult to do that with each passing year.
What I foresee is a tiered system, much like PlayStation Network just did with their PlayStation Plus program, where you can get the basics. You can have, your utilities, your power and your gas. But we as the company get to control the levels you get to exist within, right? So probably too hot for many people, probably too cold for many people. But at this base level, you're gonna have, you're not gonna die. We're gonna keep you alive, right? And then
happens with water too.
Thank you, will happen. Blessed Overlord. Yeah.
You pay a little more, and those margins come in a little bit closer. And if you pay for the premium, you could do whatever the hell you want with your power and gas.
But isn't that frightening? Because that's what we're talking about: tiered citizenship, ultimately, not in all but name. So, like. Do you know who I am? My father is a premium gold medallion citizen. And I'll be damned if you talk to me this way in a Baskin Robbins.
That's interesting. Well, that's an interesting reference there, Ben, because with airline Sky Miles type programs, it's so opaque as to what a Sky Mile is actually worth. That's controlled by the company, and there's no transparency into what that process is. And the miles that you have to earn to get to that next tier, it's also pretty vague. You have like a chart in your app that kind of tells you where you are along the process. They're called MQMs or something like that.
Yeah, medallion
Delta,
qualification
anyway.
miles.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a silver medallion status person, and we have friends that work for Delta, and I've been told that is a trash status, and that people that work for the company make fun of people with silver medallion status. I don't even get to go to the Sky Lounge, and this is through thousands of miles of travel that work has paid for the most part. We're very lucky we get to get those miles for our personal accounts. But as an individual, I never would have spent that much on travel. So just the amount you'd have to spend on travel to get to that diamond status is unbelievable over time.
And it resets every year.
And it resets every year. So I see what you're saying. These are almost like, especially with the smart card things you're saying, Ben, it's almost like in-app purchases in either phone apps that are free to play, but not the whole thing. You don't get to unlock all of the little baubles. And then, once you're in the ecosystem, you're kind of like eating out of their hand to a degree. Because you don't get
I
the
see
same
you
experience.
moving. Yes. Matt, you've been waving a finger. What hit you?
Imagine if it is a microtransaction system. Look, I've been playing a little bit of that Diablo Immortal game, and my God, the microtransactions in that sucker. But
it's egregious. Yeah,
it is, but it's still so much fun. It's still Diablo. I'm addicted. But anyway, imagine if every time you went to your thermostat and you wanted to, like, let's say turn it down 1 degree to 76 or 75. You had to choose to make that microtransaction at that moment, at that point of sale. Where you get 1 degree. If you want 2 degrees, it's going to be a little more expensive because 2 degrees right now we're at peak hours, so you're going to have to spend a little more. And instead of it just being a monthly thing that gets calculated by the company, you are actually seeing it happen, and they're overcharging a bit more than they would.